planning the opening was a whole other gambit because I don't think the production company wanted us to spend quite as much time as we did with the opening.
The opening title sequence starts in a forest and winds its way into the interior of the Playhouse, where Pee-wee is manically going through the song and the Playhouse itself.
For the theme song, George and Paul came, and not the Beatles, came to me with lyric ideas that they liked.
That happened in Paul's dressing room halfway through the shoot. They had scheduled for him to do the opening credits theme song, and he brought me into his dressing room and he said, we got to write this theme song. Do you want to help me write it? And I said, yeah, what do you have in mind? And he said, something Betty Boopish. And he goes, come on in and plug yourself up a chair. It was just basically globe be spinning, Mr. Windows grinning. It was just, basically to get all those words in there. Paul had said he wanted everybody mentioned, all the puppets and what have you. And we sent it to Mark Mothersbaugh. And then the music came back, and it was basically the same thing that we had sung into the tape recorder. It was just like the longest theme song ever on television, probably.
We all were into Space Age Bachelor Pad music at the time, and so we decided to put a little bit of like a Polynesian Martin Denny kind of thing at the beginning, and then have it, when you got to the door of the Playhouse, all of a sudden it would go crazy. When we were talking about who we should have sing it and the theme song, and it was kind of like a Betty Boop character would have been perfect, and he said, let's get Cyndi Lauper. And I knew of her because of her pop music. And we flew to New York to meet with her after the song was written, and she actually did sing the song.
Now we get back to fair warning. It's gonna be that kind of morning. We're being wacky. We're getting naughty. Now he's cuckoo. And he's Playhouse.
In terms of the opening title sequence, that took a really, really long time because you had this enormous panoramic set. You had lots and lots of miniatures and models, lots of rigging. You had an enormous camera that was basically, it looked like it was on locomotive tracks. It was this enormous computer-controlled camera.
I remember watching Prudence put together that claymation opening. I sat and watched for about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. That sort of painstaking process of shooting, moving, shooting, moving, shooting, moving, shooting, moving. It was extraordinary.
Paul had a very specific idea for that, a very specific idea for what he wanted. So I did some storyboards, we agreed on the storyboards, and then we basically had this enormous set built.
The exterior of the Playhouse, it was a birthday cake with a trailer that had been smushed into the side of it. And it was sitting on a dock, abandoned boat dock, with the Sphinx on top. So pitching that idea to Paul, I mean, that's not your normal, it's not even your abnormal house.
I did the original drawing, the Playhouse with the lava lamps, the Sphinx, all of that stuff. I came up with that. But in my mind, I was also having to think in this job, like, who was I going to assign what? Wayne was a puppet guy, so he was working on puppets and wallpaper designs. And Rick was very good at managing people, and he can build anything. And so I got him assigned to build that exterior Playhouse model.
I designed the Playhouse model and then the landscape that was around it. I remember when we had it in the place it was supposed to go in to shoot, there was a problem because it was a room that was not much bigger than the room we're in right now, which is not particularly large. And Paul was just like, we got to see every inch of this. It looks fantastic. We got to show this off.
Paul really had a sense of wanting to have the idea that you were kind of in a helicopter flying through this thing to give that sensation of it. And there were a couple of technical limitations with the particular rig we were using that weren't quite working. And it became a frustration with Paul not seeing what he wanted to. So at a certain point, I said, come on down to this set. I want to give you a camcorder, and I want you to walk around and literally, like, show me what you want, because I'm just not quite seeing it. So we literally got him to come around and literally hand hold a camcorder and sort of move around the set. In the end, we ended up doing something different, but it was that sense of really like, I'm trying to bring your vision to life. Let's get as close as we can to what's inside your brain to do it.
So I basically took the entire stage it was built on, which is an 8 by 8 foot square table, and I just had them put casters on it. And then we centered we found center, and we put a pole in the middle. So the whole thing, they put tape on the ground around the edge and incremented it so they could literally move the entire landscape with the model on it. All that stop motion that was going on top of it, you move the entire thing, and then you move every one of those characters. So there was scaffolding where people were on planks and they were rolled in. And I made particular places in the landscape where you could come up out of the landscape and animate and go back down without being seen from underneath the table. All of that was just insane thing to do for an animator. It was just, it was like, what? I'm going to have to do, that people were sweating bullets. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that people hadn't done. And I'm not saying it's revolutionary, because it's not, the ideas are not revolutionary ideas filmmaking-wise. It just was very, very difficult.
We used a special technique to do the opening title sequence in playing back the song at half speed and shooting at half speed with the camera. So everything was slowed down. So he was singing the song very slowly. The camera was rolling film very slowly. So when it all got sunk up at regular speed at the end, it had this hyper, kinetic energy that was only possible through that technique.
You got a couple of talking pants, and the genie ran the wish. At TV's Playhouse.
It took us 20 different versions, 20 different times shooting this with a large computer-controlled, motion-controlled camera to get it to the point where it was the vision that Paul wanted. So there was freedom to explore, but it really had to hit the vision he was after.
Every day we did a new camera move over the flyover of the set. Phil and I would walk it down to Paul. We would wait for hours to show it to him. He would look at it. He would say, oh no, I think it would be better than this. And he always did. He always made it better, but it took 7 weeks.
In fact, the 20th time, Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo and I, who was doing the music for the same thing and encountering the same kind of challenges, were sitting together in the dressing room waiting to talk to Paul, who was in full Pee Wee makeup at the time. So Mark and I are sitting there sort of talking about, God, we can't seem to hit what he wants. We can't seem to get this feeling of it. And I said, well, I got an idea. And this was like back in the cassette and VHS days. I said, tell you what, you set up your boombox and I'll set up my VHS. I'll give you a cue. You play your music track, because we hadn't seen them together. Hard to believe these days, but yeah, so we went in and we sat in Paul's dressing room, and he'd had his lunch and was, ready to look at the latest version of Failure from us. And so I set up the test on the VHS. These were like little black and white motion tests. So I pushed my VHS and hit Mark to hit the audio, and that music and the visuals flowed. And Paul went, yeah, that's it, that's what I'm after. And it really took seeing that thing together. At that point, we could do the final animation, put each individual single frame that just took days and days to do it. When we finally screened the final version of it on the set, on the moviola, the whole crew and everyone was around, we looked at it and ran it, and Paul said, I bet you thought I was never going to approve that. I said, well, I know the show's going in the air in 2 weeks, so eventually you'd have to. And he looked at it and he went, yeah, that was a real endless hell of revisions, wasn't it?
Pee-wee's Playhouse.
The first season, the first one, I boarded a lot of those ideas. I remember me and Phil, we even went out to lunch and we sat down and we just kind of hashed it out. I had a sort of a grander idea. I wanted it to come from outer space. And And, budgets being budgets, it had to be cut down a little bit. But I had boarded all these, it starts in outer space, and then you get closer and closer and closer to this landscape, which actually the second iteration of it was more like that. It was a little bit more like that. The original Playhouse model got destroyed after the first season, or partially destroyed. It wasn't shipped to New York, from New York to LA. So it was rebuilt. And then we shot a new opening, which had the animals in Africa. It had a little bit more scope to it. I think it reflected there was a little bit bigger budget. And that was actually shot completely with a motion control rig, and it wasn't a table that was all rotated. They actually had a rig. They did it the right way, where a rig came in and went and shot around it.